All right, how's everyone doing? I am Rich Celenza. Thanks for checking out the Rich Celenza Show. So, what I'm going to talk today about is getting lost in the shuffle. I know this sounds crazy a lot of times when I talk this way, but I'm going to kind of give you a backstory on kind of how I used to kind of get lost in the shuffle and how much I kind of liked it. And I think a lot of people that are out there that find themselves kind of, in places where they don't know anybody or know what to do, kind of how to look at that as an advantage, not a disadvantage. Because I think a lot of times when we get lost in the shuffle, a lot of times in life, we start to get scared or we're fearful or we're lost, right? A lot of times. But, a lot of times being lost is where I kind of found where I wanted to go, I guess you could say. And this started at a young age with me. My father owning a nightclub and me being very young, and my mother also being very popular within her religious community, no matter where I went, a lot of people noticed me, especially with my mom, with a lot of her religious figures, because I hung out with a lot of adults. There wasn't always a lot of kids, but my mother took me everywhere because it was just me and her. A lot of other family members or other groups were married, so a lot of times they didn't have their kids. So I ended up spending a lot of time with hundreds of people at a lot of different things regarding religion. And then back to my dad owning a nightclub. When you're 7, 8, 10, 12, 14, walking around a nightclub, I think you're going to stand out, right? And I kind of call that a spotlight position to a certain degree. And then what was interesting with me is I grew up and I hung out in many different neighborhoods throughout Chicago. And I had friends, a lot of friends from different neighborhoods from where I was living, or my family from Chicago, Cicero to LaGrange, Taylor Street, and then living in Melrose Park, a lot of different Italian neighborhoods. And I went to different schools too. So I went to a different grade school. And then for 1 year, I went to another grade school, made friends, came back, did a different junior high. Then I did a different high school than everyone else. And I also was doing another high school in Florida. So I was kind of bouncing between two high schools. But back to Chicago, I also worked in Melrose Park, so in different areas too. So I park cars on weekends in some places, and then I would work for a civic center in the summers if I wasn't in Florida for a short stint. My point being is I knew and I hung out in many different neighborhoods. So no matter where I went, I just knew a lot of people. And I hung out with a lot of different guys too, which was really cool. And then you throw sports. I was always in sports, so I was kind of bopping between all these different high schools throughout Illinois, many different things. So I was meeting all these different groups, and it was all over the place. I hung out with tennis guys, then I'm hanging out with street guys, then I'm hanging out with wrestlers, then I'm hanging out with boxers, then I'm hanging out with football players, then I'm hanging out with soccer players. So all these things I was kind of maneuvering my way through. And then when I got older, especially in the city of Chicago, when I'd come back when I was living in Florida, because I moved to Florida, I'd go to clubs. We'd go to Excalibur or clubs downtown Chicago or bars. And no matter where I went, I knew a ton of people and they knew me. And then me kind of living a different lifestyle, kind of going back and forth to Florida, I kind of stood out too. I dressed different. A lot of times I was tan, they weren't. And a lot of just things I was doing was much different than anybody else was doing in Chicago at that point in time in the 80s and 90s. Living an entirely different lifestyle too. But when I would come to Florida, that was kind of what was interesting, is though being kind of, I guess you could say, in the spotlight position or knowing so many people in Chicago, no matter where I went. In Florida, I knew no one. Now, I'd go to bars with my father and collect money and help him or move equipment at times. So, yeah, sure, I'd be going in there, even at a young age, starting at 14, 15. And that included gentlemen's clubs, nightclubs, all these different things. I'd go in, help him, and leave. But I didn't know anybody, and they were kind of like keeping their distance from me because I was young. But at 18, 19, 20 years old, when I officially moved to Florida, I had to get a fake ID, and I literally just go to clubs by myself. I'd either go with guys I met at the gym, and I used to work out at these hardcore gyms, and I'd work out, and a lot of guys that I would hang out with, which were quite interesting, were these big black dudes. I don't know why I hit it off with them. I guess because I was a Chicago guy. And some other guys were very nice to me in Florida, but they were kind of more on the southern, and I was kind of a Yankee, where I would meet, either New York, my buddies, New Yorkers too, but a lot of my Italian buddies. But if it wasn't them, it would be these other black dudes. I'd go to their clubs. They'd come with me, and it was a blast. But a lot of times, I'd be by myself, too. And I'd go to these nightclubs. I guess I was just programmed to go to nightclubs or bars or wherever the hell I was at. I didn't know a soul. I would sit at the bar, or I would go stand by the dance floor, or I would just talk to different women, or just hang out there. Sometimes I dance by myself. And what was interesting is you would think that somebody being in that environment would be scared. Now, I was programmed, obviously, to be social and kind of raised in the bar and nightclub business, so that was my environment. But no matter where I was going in Florida, I was kind of alone for long periods of time, unless I was with my buddies from New York or not working. And I liked it. What I kind of liked is having both sides of it. And I think a lot of times when people are alone, they look at it as, oh my God, I got nobody. Or they may look at themselves, oh my God, I got no friends here. Especially if you moved to a different city or state, or you went to a different school. Like I said earlier, all my friends are going to one high school that was massive, and then I'm going to a private Catholic school that I didn't know anyone at all. So that's kind of whack. But those things, again, built me to understand that being alone is good. I learned so much just kind of just being myself, not always having to act a certain way around certain friends, not always being distracted, just going and doing what I wanted to do independently, and really being comfortable in my own skin, regardless what situation I found myself in. I even did that. I've talked about that maybe before in a podcast where I met a kid at Valencia College. I started to take some classes. And he said, hey, they have dollar movie night over here. Meet me over there. And I went over there and it was so busy I lost him. But I'm like, man, I've never gone to a movie by myself. I'm like 18 years old. But I'm like, I wanted to see this Richard Pryor movie. And I went in, watched the movie and loved it, and then stayed for another movie. And I said to myself, why wouldn't I go to the movies by myself? Why do I always have to wait for a friend or go on a date to go to a movie? And a lot of times you don't even see the movies you want to see. From that point on, I always went to the movies by myself if I wasn't going with friends or a girlfriend. Any movie I want to see, if someone didn't want to see it, I'd go. Now I kind of go with my kids more than anyone else. But my point being, again, is, getting lost in that shuffle, look at it as an advantage. You can kind of do whatever you want to do, go wherever you want to go, and meet people that you want to meet. And again, you don't have to have always somebody kind of next to you or feeling sometimes like you always got to keep a conversation going with them. You can just be whoever you want to be. You just got to have the confidence to go do those things. And I know it's hard for a lot of people, and especially if you're introverted. And I've discussed this before. I'm extremely introverted. I'm very extroverted. I'm both. So I know my strengths and weaknesses. But if you are introverted and you do feel alone, or you're going through certain things, I get that too. It is hard to make friends or new friends or trust people, especially in an environment you've never been in before, and you kind of, again, feel lost. But I'm here to tell you, you'd be shocked at being alone for long periods of times in environments that you wouldn't always expect to be in alone. Just kind of makes you, I think, just more open-minded. It also builds a lot of confidence. So what you think may be kind of in something kind of diminishing you or making you look a certain way, because I do think a lot of times when we're by ourselves, and everybody else is kind of in groups, you're like, man, I'm here by myself. I look like a loser. I look like a fool here. I should be here with a date, or I should be here with a group of people, or whatever the case may be. I was at the point I don't give a shit. I'll be very honest with you. I can be also a third wheel, a fifth wheel when going out with people. I don't care if there's three couples, if couples are going out, they invite me, I go. Again, that may be just confidence, but I love being independent. And I love having, to enjoy just me being independent, where I can communicate with everybody independently and not always have to, I guess, be with others. So I just want to do a podcast on this. If you got any questions or comments, please feel free to hit me up. I'm at richcelenzashow.com. All right? Take care, and I wish everyone the best.